Another afternoon at Celtic Park, another 3 points safely tucked away, but this one came wrapped in a lot more conversation than the scoreline alone suggests. Celtic did exactly what was required, beating Falkirk by 2-0 at home. And while nobody is pretending this was a vintage performance for the ages, it was the kind of result you happily accept at this stage of the season. Solid, professional, and ultimately effective, even if there were moments where the game threatened to drift away from Celtic's control before the quality told in the end. From the first whistle, there was an understanding that this was not going to be one of those chaotic, high-scoring afternoons we have seen in recent seasons against the same opposition. Falkirk arrived organised, confident, and clearly willing to test Celtic rather than simply sit in and hope for the best. In the opening period, Celtic saw plenty of the ball, but did not immediately turn that possession into clear chances. There was a spell in the first half where Falkirk actually enjoyed their best football, moving it neatly and forcing Celtic to stay switched on defensively. It was not alarming, but it was enough to remind everyone that this was not going to be a free hit. Celtic's own attacking play in that first half was steady, without being spectacular. The tempo was controlled, the passing generally tidy, but the final ball was often missing. Chances were limited, and the Falkirk goalkeeper was not worked as much as the home crowd might have liked. That said, there was never a sense of panic. Celtic looked comfortable in their structure, happy to recycle possession and wait for the right moment, rather than forcing the issue too early. The breakthrough, when it came, summed up what Celtic have relied on so often this season. One moment of quality, one lapse punished. Kieran Tierney delivered a dangerous ball into the box, and the movement and timing from the striker were excellent. The header was outstanding, guided perfectly beyond the goalkeeper and in off the post. It was a goal that owed as much to intelligence and technique as it did to physical presence, and it gave Celtic the lead without them having to dominate the game. That goal changed the tone slightly, but it did not turn the match into a procession. Falkirk continued to show they were well-drilled, and early in the second half, they arguably had their strongest spell of the entire game. For a short period, Celtic looked a touch nervous, struggling to fully impose themselves, and there was a feeling that if Falkirk were going to get anything from the match, it would need to come during that window. They had possession, they had territory, and they looked capable of asking questions. Then, almost out of nothing, Celtic struck again. The second goal was all about combination play and understanding. Callum McGregor and Benji Negron linked up brilliantly down the left, exchanging passes at speed and slicing through the Falkirk defence. It was the kind of move that looks effortless when executed well, but requires trust and awareness between players. The finish itself was calm and precise, killing the game stone dead at a point where it could have gone in a very different direction. At 2-0, Celtic were able to manage the contest far more comfortably. The urgency drained out of Falkirk's play, and Celtic's experience came to the fore. Possession was used intelligently, the defensive shape remained solid, and there was little sense of danger in the closing stages. It was not about chasing more goals, but about seeing the job through, and in that respect, Celtic did exactly what was needed. One of the more striking aspects of the afternoon, however, had nothing to do with what happened on the pitch. The atmosphere inside Celtic Park felt unusual, subdued, and at times strangely flat. Even after the opening goal, the reaction from the stands was muted. There has been a lot of talk recently about the absence of key supporter groups and the impact that has on the energy inside the stadium, and this match only added fuel to that discussion. Sunday afternoon kickoffs rarely help, but there was a definite sense that the connection between the crowd and the team was not quite there. There were also audible signs of frustration directed towards those running the club with chants and banners, making it clear that not everyone is satisfied with how things are being handled off the pitch. It created an odd backdrop to a game that, in purely footballing terms, was relatively straightforward. The players themselves seemed aware of it, going about their business professionally, but without the usual roar pushing them forward. Individually, there were several performances worth noting. Callum McGregor was excellent in a game that suited his strengths. Against less physical opposition, he was able to dictate play, find space, and drive Celtic forward with intelligence and composure. This was far more comfortable territory for him than some of the tougher, more combative fixtures seen recently, and he looked every inch the leader in midfield. Benji Negron remains one of the most intriguing figures in this Celtic side. He may not always dominate matches from start to finish, and there are still questions about what he offers beyond goals, but his numbers are impossible to ignore. 15 goals from midfield at this stage of the season is an exceptional return, and his strike here was another example of his knack for arriving in the right place at the right time. Love him or question him, he continues to deliver when it matters. Up front, the striker led the line well, even if much of his best work came outside the penalty area. His hold-up play was strong, he linked play intelligently, and he took his goal with real authority. There will be days when the service into the box is better, especially from the wide areas, but his movement and willingness to demand the ball were encouraging signs for a player still settling into life at Celtic Park. This felt like another step in the right direction. Defensively, Celtic were rarely stretched. Falkirk had moments of neat play, but clear-cut chances were few and far between. The backline dealt with most situations calmly, and the goalkeeper was not required to make any truly decisive interventions. It was one of those afternoons where doing the basics well was enough, and Celtic did exactly that. In the wider context of the season, and this result keeps Celtic firmly in the conversation at the top end of the table. With rivals dropping points elsewhere, every win takes on added importance, and while there will be tougher tests ahead, this was the kind of game that champions navigate successfully. It was not spectacular, it was not flawless, but it was effective, and at this stage, effectiveness is everything. Attention now inevitably turns to what happens away from the pitch, with the transfer window adding another layer of intrigue to the day. There are strong indications that multiple deals are in motion, with medicals already completed, and movement expected before the deadline, whether that involves new faces coming in, players moving on, or a bit of both. It is clear that Celtic are not finished yet, and the coming hours could shape how the rest of the season unfolds. As the dust settled on the result itself, the wider discussion naturally drifted toward what this performance tells us about where Celtic are right now, not just in terms of points on the board, but in identity, balance, and direction. This was one of those matches that quietly reveals a lot if you are willing to look beyond the headline scoreline. Celtic were not at their fluent best, yet they still controlled large parts of the game, showed patience when things were not flowing, and crucially had the composure to strike at the moments that mattered most. One of the most encouraging signs was the variation in Celtic's build-up play. There has been criticism in recent weeks about predictability, about relying too heavily on direct balls or becoming too slow and sideways when faced with organised opposition. Against Falkirk, there was a noticeable attempt to mix things up. At times, the ball was worked patiently through midfield. At other moments, longer passes were played early into runners, stretching the defence and forcing Falkirk to turn. It was not perfect, but it was a step toward becoming less one-dimensional. Falkirk deserve credit for the challenge they presented. This was not an opponent that rolled over or allowed Celtic to dictate every phase without resistance. They pressed intelligently, especially during spells early in both halves, and they were brave enough to commit bodies forward when they sensed uncertainty. Statistically, they were far from passengers, even managing more attempts on goal. But football is often decided by quality rather than quantity, and that is where Celtic ultimately made the difference. The midfield battle was particularly interesting. Callum McGregor anchored things with authority, but around him there were contrasting styles at play. Benji Negron's role continues to divide opinion, and this match summed up that debate perfectly. There were moments when his influence outside the final third felt limited, moments where you wanted more aggression, more presence in the middle of the park. Yet when the chance arrived, he delivered again, ghosting into space and finishing with the confidence of a player who believes he will score every time an opportunity presents itself. That ability to contribute decisive moments cannot be overstated. 15 goals from midfield is not a statistic you dismiss lightly, especially in a team that has, at times, struggled to break down stubborn defenses. Even when Negron frustrates, even when his all-round involvement is questioned, the end product keeps justifying his place. The challenge for Celtic moving forward is finding the right balance around him, ensuring the midfield has enough energy and bite to compensate while still allowing him the freedom to arrive late and influence games up front. The striker's performance was another talking point. He did not spend the entire match camped inside the penalty area, instead drifting wider, dropping deeper, and acting as a focal point for build-up. That brought both positives and frustrations. His hold-up play was effective, his movements created space for others, and when the chance came, he took it superbly. At the same time, there were moments when better service from the wings could have seen him even more involved in dangerous areas. The wide players, in particular, will know they can offer more. There were situations where getting to the byline and delivering early could have caused Falkirk real problems, especially given the physical presence Celtic had in the box. Instead, too many promising attacks fizzled out without a telling cross or cutback. It is an area that will need improvement, especially against stronger opposition who will not allow as much second phase possession. Defensively, Celtic's shape and discipline were reassuring. There were no major lapses, no moments of chaos, and the back line dealt well with most of what Falkirk threw at them. Even when Falkirk enjoyed spells of possession, they struggled to turn that into clear chances. That sense of control, even during less dominant phases, is often what separates teams who grind out titles from those who fall just short. The atmosphere inside the stadium, however, remained a subplot that could not be ignored. There was a strange disconnect between what was happening on the pitch and the mood in the stands. Even positive moments failed to generate the usual surge of noise and emotion. The ongoing tension between sections of the support and the club hierarchy continues to cast a shadow, and while the players cannot be held responsible for that, it inevitably shapes the environment they perform in. For a club like Celtic, where home advantage and crowd energy have historically been so powerful, this is an issue that needs addressing sooner rather than later. Big European nights and decisive domestic fixtures demand unity and intensity from the stands, and the quieter the stadium becomes, the more questions will be asked. Results can paper over cracks for a time, but the feeling around the club suggests there is unfinished business beyond the football itself. From a managerial perspective, this match will likely be viewed as a positive, if unspectacular, step. The team responded well after recent challenges, showed resilience when Falkirk had momentum, and executed key moments with clarity. There was no sign of panic, no wild changes or overreactions, just a steady approach that trusted the players to find solutions. Looking ahead, the implications of the transfer window loom large. There is a sense that Celtic are on the verge of adding further options, particularly in attack. Reports of medicals being completed suggest movement is imminent, and that raises fascinating questions about how this squad could evolve. More competition for places, more tactical flexibility, and potentially more firepower could all change the dynamic of the side. If additional attackers arrive, it will be intriguing to see how the system adapts. There has already been discussion about whether Celtic could occasionally shift to a shape that accommodates more than one central striker, especially if profiles differ significantly. Having forwards who offer contrasting strengths opens up possibilities, not just in terms of formation, but in how Celtic approach different opponents. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers are swirling round Parkhead after what's being described as a leaked audio clip allegedly capturing Celtic manager Martin O'Neill tearing into his squad following a limp training session. The recording, which has yet to be verified, is said to feature the gaffer branding the players a bunch of cowards, a line that's already doing the rounds among supporters and pundits alike. If true, it paints a picture of a dressing room under real strain, with standards being questioned and patience wearing thin. Sources close to the club suggest the rant came after drills fell flat, tempo dropped, and effort levels looked well below what's expected of a side carrying such weight of history. In the clip, O'Neill is rumoured to have raised the stakes further by hinting the captain could be benched if leadership on the pitch doesn't improve. That threat alone has fueled speculation about a possible shake-up, with some believing the manager is ready to make an example, no matter the name on the shirt. Around Lennoxtown, folk are said to be split on whether this hardline approach will light a fire or deepen the cracks. Old heads argue O'Neill has been a straight talker, never one for cuddles when the work rate dips. Others fear that public humiliation, even if it's meant to stay private, can backfire in the modern game, especially when trust is already fragile. The club, for its part, is keeping stum. There's been no official comment on the existence of the audio, let alone its content. That silence has only added to the rumour mill, with fans reading into every selection hint and training ground whisper. Is the captain's armband safe? Will there be changes made purely to send a message, or is this all a storm in a teacup, a moment of heat blown out of proportion? For now, it remains speculation, but in Glasgow, it doesn't take much for a spark to catch. If the words are genuine, they underline a manager demanding grit and bravery. Whether the squad answers that call or recoils from it is the question hanging heavy in the air. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.